Divinity Original Sin 2 was a phenomenal game. One of my favorite games of all time. And then this just like, you know, absolutely took off and is way better. That's crazy to say that this game is way better than Divinity Original Sin 2 because Divinity Original Sin 2 is a top tier, S tier RPG. So Baldur's Gate 3 has a absolutely insane player count right now, which is to no one's surprise, I feel like. And one of my favorite YouTubers, JuiceHead, recently released this video talking a little bit about an insane update on the game. And I figured I'd react to it live and then give you guys my thoughts on what's to really come with this game.
You can look at these numbers and think, wow, it is absolutely insane that Baldur's Gate 3 got that.
I'm pretty sure these numbers are like breaking top 10 records right now. I feel like I saw something about that either on Twitter or a different YouTube video or something. But I mean, to me, it's not a surprise that it's breaking any kind of records considering the game is so deep, but also relatively polished for how deep it is.
That many players. But I personally think the further you dive into the story, the more remarkable the current Baldur's Gate 3 situation becomes, and I think it may genuinely be a redefining moment for gaming overall. As you're almost certainly aware, Baldur's Gate 3 dropped this past week, and since the initial release, this game has been breaking all kinds of records. But I think the most impressive record, or really feat, was hit
By the way, it dropped this week on PC. I think PS5 it's coming out in September, and Early Access it came out like 2 years ago.
Just yesterday. But we've also actually gotten some updates to the game to address some of the issues currently with it, and we even hear a bit about what could be coming next from Larian Studios. This weekend, Baldur's Gate 3 hit a peak player count of over...
What's coming next? Dude, this game is so big, I don't think I'm going to be done with it for like years. They should just keep updating this and I'll be happy for a long time to come.
800,000 on Steam.
That's crazy.
The 9th most played game on Steam ever.
Yeah, I think that's the screenshot I've seen. 9th most played on games, ninth most played game on Steam ever. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. The one that surprised me the most out of all of these is Cyberpunk. I didn't realize that got as much success as it did, like towards the beginning, because like it was so broken. Baldur's Gate 3, on the other hand, is super polished on release. They did have like a long time in early access, so they got a lot of time to kind of refine it. But that's fine with me because when you're selling a game in early access, you're letting the player know, hey, this game is broken, but we plan to fix it. And you're kind of a playtester for us. So having a long time in early access is absolutely fine by me. Cyberpunk was a good game to me. I mean, I didn't face a lot of bugs and issues, but I know a lot of players did on release. So I don't like that they released it as early as they did. And seeing that they still succeeded so much is almost disheartening because I don't want that to kind of make people think that it's okay to do it again, you know? Or like, I don't want like publishers to think it's okay to do that again. But yeah, I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 100% deserves all the success they found on release. And honestly, I wish it was in the top 5
on Steam ever, which is only elevated by the fact that the CEO of Larian expected 100,000 players at most during this time. The developers of Baldur's Gate 3 had...
Okay. I love the CEO of Larian, but saying that he expected 100K at max, I feel like he's almost trying to tell himself to like wish for a little less so that when a little more happens, he gets like excited. I don't know if that's like a mental thing he's trying to do, but there was no way it was only going to be 100K. With the amount of success this game had, even in early access, I think it's no surprise whatsoever that it surpassed that by a big margin.
Had their best estimates at 100,000 players, while in reality the first weekend alone did 8 times that. And if for some reason you aren't one of those players, you can get Baldur's Gate 3 DRM free right now on GOG using my affiliate code down below. What I think makes this whole situation all the more spectacular.
GOG is awesome, by the way. If you guys are okay with not having all your games on Steam, I think you should definitely... GOG is a better route to go in terms of a game launcher, because specifically it's DRM free. I like to use Steam for everything most of the time because I like getting those achievements, but that's kind of me just being dumb.
Is the monumental risk.
GOG has achievements too, by the way. I don't know why I like Steam more. I've had it longer, so I think that's probably it.
That Larian Studios took with Baldur's Gate 3. Something that I think just a ton of people are missing is that this game was in early access for the last 3 years. The developers released almost the entirety
3 years, not 2 years. I was wrong.
of Act 1 3 years ago, just basically giving everyone a 3-year early access to a massive chunk of the game, and that could have backfired in a major way, but instead they took 3 years of player feedback and ended up creating a masterpiece. But I think ended up becoming the single...
And here's the thing about having 3 years of early access, right? I know I kind of mentioned this before, but you're being upfront and honest with your player base. You're not saying, oh yeah, this is a polished game we're releasing. You're saying this is an early access game, and we're going to be in early access for a long time until the game is finished. So the player doesn't have any delusions of buying early access and then thinking, oh my God, this is completely broken. Yeah, you bought it because you knew it was broken. You just wanted to experience it before everyone else. So I think that's a good way to go about it for any game developer. Even like games that are on console should maybe have an early access on PC first. Like I wouldn't mind there being an early access for Starfield, for example. They would never do that, but I'm just saying like I wouldn't mind that. The other thing is like there's a lot of players like me who completely avoided buying early access because we wanted to experience the game completely when it came out. I'm one of those people who like when a show releases on Netflix, I'll just like binge it all the way through if I'm really excited about the show. I really hate it when they do something like Amazon Prime did with The Boys and they release episode weekly. That is not something that appeals to me. So when I heard that this game was coming out in early access, I had already played Divinity Original Sin 2. I loved that game. That's a top 10 game for me. So knowing how much I love Divinity Original Sin 2, I decided, you know what? This game is going to be phenomenal. Larian Studios hasn't had a bad anything in the public eye. They haven't done anything stupid. So if they're going to build a game that's similar to Divinity Original Sin 2, I'd rather just stick with not playing it until it releases fully and then experience the entire game in its entirety. I didn't want to have to like play through Act 1 and then have to wait for 3 years. So I feel like there were a lot of players like me, and having players like that helped them get like that 500K or whatever amount of initial player count when it released.
Most important decision around Baldur's Gate 3 was moving the release date. Baldur's Gate 3 was originally supposed to come out on August 31st for both PC and PS5. But then, all of a sudden, Starfield gets delayed, and then delayed a second time, and then, oh yeah, Bethesda decided to do some early access. So now, Starfield...
Okay, so this was a genius decision by Larian Studios, and here's why. Obviously, Starfield is not like a top-down isometric kind of game. Neither is Baldur's Gate. Everything's 3D rendered in Baldur's Gate as well. But it's a very different kind of game. But when describing Starfield to the average Joe or the average gamer, what you hear is Starfield is an RPG. What else is an RPG? Baldur's Gate 3. So to the average gamer, which is majority of the gaming population, unfortunately, the average gamer is majority of the gaming population. Those players will see, oh, this is an RPG and this is an RPG. Oh, Starfield's made by a bigger company. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and buy Starfield because I can't afford both. That's what the average gaming population would have done, in my opinion. So when they decided to release it earlier, I think that was a genius move because that gives players a month to save up for Starfield again, but also buy Baldur's Gate 3. In my opinion, I think Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be Game of the Year. I think it's going to be better than Starfield. I haven't played Starfield, obviously, but that's just based on what I thought about Divinity Original Sin 2 versus what I thought about Fallout 4. Both games were amazing, but that's just my comparison point, right? If you're growing from Divinity Original Sin 2 to Baldur's Gate 3 and Baldur's Gate 3 is this good, I think Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be better than Starfield because Starfield's growing from the likes of Fallout 4, Skyrim, etc. I don't think it's going to match the actual role-playing depth as much as Baldur's Gate 3 has, like the amount of options and player choices the player can make. So in my opinion, Baldur's Gate 3 is better, and I would have chosen Baldur's Gate 3. But I am not a majority of the population kind of gamer. I really look into this stuff. I really like super deep mechanics. And I spend every day playing games for a couple hours at least. So for the majority of the gaming population, I feel like Larian Studios would have lost there if they had released it at the same time as Starfield.
Is also coming out on August 31st. Sorry about that, Larian. And to me, this honestly feels like a movie moment. The trillion-dollar corporation places their flagship release on the same day as the little indie studio. Because evidently Microsoft didn't really view Larian as a major point of competition. But instead of Larian just sticking to that date or even delaying further into the year.
And to be completely honest, I don't think Baldur's Gate 3 is major competition for Starfield. I know that's going to make a lot of people mad. This is coming from someone who loves Baldur's Gate 3, right? This is a top probably 5 game for me. I haven't finished it, but I've put a ton of hours into it already, and this is one of the best games I've ever played. Knowing that, I don't think it's going to compete with Starfield. I don't think the same demographic is going to go for Baldur's Gate 3 as they would for Starfield.
As many other devs would have, Larian said nah and did the unthinkable of actually moving up the release date to almost a full month earlier. And 800,000 players
Smart
later,
move.
I think this could go down as one of the best management decisions in video game history. Even with the potential risk of additional crunch to get the game out in time,
genius.
and of course whatever bugs are
Larian
going to make it
Studio
through
CEO.
as a result, and the pushback of the PS5 version now having a delayed release after the PC version. But what really happened is we have a time where Baldur's Gate 3 gets to completely dominate the video game sphere overall. There really just isn't much other news outside of Baldur's Gate 3, and it gives us...
I'm not going to spoil it, but this guy is fighting these giants. There's a different route you can take with that. That is, in my opinion, a lot better. See, this is what I mean. Like, the game just has so many, like, different paths you can take, which is what makes it so good. You really feel like this is the most immersed you can probably feel in a game because you really make decisions and they have consequences. This is one of the first games where I am really trying not to save scum, even though the opportunity to save scum is available to me. I'm trying to just live with my decisions in this game because I am definitely going to play it again and I want to experience different routes.
This game an opportunity to truly flourish and capture an entirely new audience. This will likely go down as the most successful CRPG of all time, and you can see in the reviews and even some of the commentary online. For a ton of players, this is one of the first CRPGs they have ever played, and many of them are absolutely loving it. I wouldn't be surprised if Baldur's Gate 3 is making a lot of other companies reevaluate their plans for their own games, perhaps implementing some more hardcore RPG mechanics.
You know what? That's such a good point. I didn't even think about that, but I feel like when Divinity Original Sin 2 came out, it brought in a lot of audience that they didn't already have. Like a lot of the market that wasn't CRPG players. They brought them into the CRPG genre. But I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 is doing that significantly at a better rate. I think a lot of players who haven't played CRPGs before are going to be coming in to play CRPGs just for this game. A lot of them are going to love it. A lot of them are going to hate it, right? I mean, I have a buddy of mine who loves RPGs, but he hates CRPGs. Too much reading and whatnot, right? So I get it. But it's really cool to see that Baldur's Gate 3 is bringing in a whole new audience. Because you know what that does? That allows developers like Larian Studios to spend even more on their next game and make all the correct decisions they've made on this game and even more correct decisions on the next game, like having a 3-year early access period, like making sure there's no microtransactions. It allows for that because they're bringing in more players into this genre, which means more money, which means they can spend more on their next game, right? They can make another generation-defining game.
And even with a topic more relevant to this channel, the OG Fallouts. For years now, people have been calling for the OG Fallout to be remade in a 3D style very similar to other modern Bethesda games, but I think the success of Baldur's Gate 3 can make the likelihood of them remaining a CRPG.
The only Fallout games I've played are Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 4, and both were amazing. Fallout New Vegas, I don't think I finished. It had a better story, as far as I remember. But Fallout, I mean, it was way too old by the time I played it. I wish they do some sort of remake or something.
He's still having that top-down style a lot higher. But the success of Baldur's Gate 3 is influencing consumer decision-making already. The crazy positive reception to Baldur's Gate 3, and likely just how massive this launch ended up being on PC, has dramatically increased the sales of Baldur's Gate 3. Since the PC release, the PS5 version of Baldur's Gate 3 has been slowly working its way up the ranks to now being the #1 best-selling pre-order on all of the PlayStation Network in the United States.
That's crazy, because I really find this game to not be a generic gamer's game. Like it doesn't feel like it is to me, right? But seeing that it's getting so much success is absolutely awesome.
And this is pretty important. This isn't just people wish listing the game or saying they're excited for it. This is people actually putting their money where their mouth is and buying Baldur's Gate 3 already. Now, of course, Baldur's Gate 3 will almost certainly have a smaller release on PS5, but we're seeing in real time how PlayStation users are watching the release on PC and just buying the game in anticipation because things are going so well. Baldur's Gate 3 is, of course, also coming to Xbox, but they've had some issues getting split screen working on the Series S, so it seems like it's not going to make it to Xbox until 2024. But now
I've seen a lot of that stuff with a lot of games for the Series S. I don't know what's going on there, but I feel like Xbox is kind of hindering themselves with that console because like now they're going to release it on the Xbox Series S and Series X at the same time, obviously. And because it doesn't work on the Series S, now it's going to get an even more delayed release, which makes sense from the perspective of Larian Studios. But I'm just saying, like, Xbox really, I feel like, shot themselves in the foot with that console's release.
Now, as many users and critics alike have had the opportunity to experience this game on PC, we've gotten some very interesting feedback, such as hitting a pretty wild milestone with the review score, as Baldur's Gate 3 is now the highest rated game to be released in 2023 on Metacritic overall.
Oh my god, I did not know this. That is crazy. I mean, it makes sense, but that is wild. Because this isn't on the same, like, budget as a game like Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I feel like, right? Like there's no way they had as high a budget as a game like that from Nintendo. So that's crazy that it's beating games like that. Jedi Survivor, I feel like, probably had a bit bigger budget as well.
Very notably passing Tears of the Kingdom for the #1 spot. And on OpenCritic, Baldur's Gate 3 right now is just 1 point below Tears of the Kingdom.
Ridiculous.
And this creates a pretty wild stat where each main entry in the Baldur's Gate series has not only landed a score in the 90s, but each subsequent entry has gotten a higher score in the 90s. And as wild
Yeah,
as
I never played these original games. This one came out on the year I was born. That's crazy. I never played these original games, but I've heard they're really good and they define the genre. So it makes sense that Baldur's Gate 3 had to be good, right? When Larian got the rights to make Baldur's Gate 3, they had to know that this has to be amazing. There's no other solution for it because the first two were that good.
All of this it's definitely still tentative. Due to its early release and its monumental size, very few reviews have actually been posted for Baldur's Gate 3 overall. I only got my review code on the day of release. And with how massive this game is, a lot of reviewers are taking a bit of time to get their reviews out, so the score...
The other thing is some people are posting reviews like before they finish the game, which I think is unethical, to be completely honest. Like, you won't see a review from me for this game for months, because I'm going to play through it multiple times before I review it. So I feel like people who are like reviewing games halfway through or like 3/4 of the way through or even 99% of the way through and not finishing it, that's like unethical in my opinion. It doesn't matter if you liked it or if you hated it. You're not giving a real perspective on the game. Like previews and there's like initial thought reviews, those kinds of reviews are fine, but you probably shouldn't review a game if you haven't finished
score
it.
Could definitely change dramatically in one way or another, but honestly, as of right now, the reception has been overwhelmingly positive, so even if the score does go down, it'll still very likely remain in the high 90s. And perhaps more importantly, over the past couple of days, we have definitely seen a narrative shift. Many went from thinking Tears of the Kingdom and Starfield would have to battle it out for Game of the Year, to now many feeling that Baldur's Gate 3 could just end up stealing the show, which is absolutely wild. But we've also seen the developers being incredible.
Yeah, for me, this is probably going to be Game of the Year. I haven't finished it, so I can't say that for certain. There might be something that I absolutely hate towards the end of the game or whatever. But as of this moment, this is currently my Game of the Year based on how addicted I get. In like my first 3 play sessions, I had 20 hours in the game. Yeah, I played for 6 hours at a time. And sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. But yeah, within the first 3 play sessions, there aren't a lot of games that get me that addicted, right? And a lot of times, like an hour and a half, I'm just like speccing my characters. I'm taking notes. Like, it's not like active playing even. That's how invested I got into this game. I think like 3 nights ago or something, or no, 2 nights ago, I played the game and I took like 2 hours just like respecking my characters because I had gotten to a point in the story where like I wasn't okay with how I started them off and I wanted to change my playstyle. And it took like around 2 hours just to respec them and kind of take notes and figure out what I wanted to do with them. But like there aren't a lot of games where I would spend 2 hours on respecking a character. You know, it's that good.
Incredibly active with updates. The game has already gotten 2 hotfixes since release. There's been some pretty notable changes, like the version number no longer being plastered on screen at all times, which is very nice, as well as some miscellaneous fixes like missing undies or even having certain body parts clipped through clothing being addressed and fixed, with the biggest effort being around crashes or progress blocking bugs, or even some people just randomly being silent in dialogue so you couldn't hear what they're saying. And although
They're doing a really good job with the bug fixes. I will say I have encountered a notable amount of bugs, but none of them have been game breaking. Like there have been situations where like I'll try and talk to an NPC and like no matter how many times I click on them, it just won't let me talk to them. Like the tooltip appears where like you'll have like the speech bubble to like allow you to interact with them, but like once I click it, it won't work. And that only happens for some particular NPCs. But then it's like I'll reload the save or something and it'll go away, or I'll like restart the game, it'll go away, something like that. Nothing game breaking has happened so far. No like save issues or save bugs, which is like the most important thing, right?
these initial 2 hotfixes are great, especially with how fast they got posted. This is also an area that definitely needs a bit more love. Act 1 is mostly fine, but again, this has been around for a couple of years now, so they've had time to fix many issues. And
right, so in case you guys didn't know, or if you didn't play Early Access or something, they only released Act 1 in Early Access. They have actually changed Act 1 a lot as well, even like from a narrative perspective. But Act 1 was the only thing that was released for the first 3 years. So it makes sense that they were able to solve a lot of the bugs in Act 1, but the later acts still have bugs.
Fortunately, what you'll find online is many players are reporting that issues are far more prevalent in both Acts 2 and 3, to the point where some entire quest lines are broken for some players.
That's unfortunate.
And it seems like what's going on is the game is so massive that many players simply haven't gotten to Act 2 or 3 yet. So as a result, many players haven't even hit some of the worst bugs yet.
Makes
now,
sense,
hopefully Larian
yeah.
can get to many of these bugs before players actually get to that stage of the game, but it does seem like it's a bit of a battle right now. Players progressing to the buggier stages of the game, while Larian desperately tries to fix those bugs before many players get there. Although there's likely more on the horizon from the studio, but it may not actually be with Baldur's Gate 3. Larian was seemingly one of the acquisition targets of Microsoft.
At the rate of which they're fixing things right now, I think by the time, like he said, like JuiceHead said, by the time 99% of the players get to these later acts, Acts 2 and 3, those bugs will probably be fixed. Only the people who are playing this game without food or sleep or like just rushing through, which is honestly probably kind of hard to do. You have to do almost everything to like level up enough to be able to fight a lot of these enemies. But only the players who are like rushing through or like are playing this game day and night are going to get to the later acts this early on.
Microsoft in the past. And when asked about this in a recent interview, the CEO of Larian said, "I'm getting older, but I'm certainly not done yet," and expressed no interest in selling the company, mainly due to how a corporate owner would limit their creative freedom. "We could do things in service of the games we're making," said the CEO, rather than pursuing a project management style that prioritizes efficiency and profit above all else. So even despite the fact that this would probably be the perfect time to sell the studio, the CEO is not interested, which is a really good thing if you like what you're seeing with Baldur's Gate 3. But at the same time, there may not actually be DLC for Baldur's Gate 3. The CEO has also described how Larian has not currently begun work on any expansions for this game. Many were hoping something like that would increase the level cap above 12, but the CEO describes how that would be quite difficult. Level 12 to 20 adventures require a different way of doing things in terms of antagonists you're going to have to deal with, which require a lot of development to do them properly, which would make this much more of an expansion in terms of development effort. A lot of D&D adventures are sub-level 12 for precisely that reason. So it sounds like neat, easy expansion material until you start thinking about it and it's not as easy as one would imagine.
I love how upfront he's being about this. Like instead of saying straight up, like I don't want to do this, like this is too much work or something like that, he's giving a good reason to the players. And he's not pretending the players are stupid. He's giving like an actual D&D reason as to why it doesn't make sense to do that. I love how upfront he is. You don't get a lot of CEOs who have that kind of transparency when they talk in the public eye.
One of the big issues being is as you get to some of these higher levels, the spells and abilities you have access to are almost godlike. So balancing and creating a game around that would become increasingly difficult as you get to some of those higher levels. But it's not the only reason, as the CEO also describes how with how many possible endings there are to Baldur's Gate 3, that too would be a massive challenge. There are a lot of choices you can make in Baldur's Gate 3. It's one of the best parts of the game, and having to account for a lot of those with an expansion or continuation of the story would be a monumental effort. But there still is good news, as the CEO continues on to say, I know what we want to make, and the team also knows where we're heading. We'll see where that lands. I've learned in the past that you need to be careful announcing things before they're ready, because sometimes you have to cancel them because they don't work out. We could work on an expansion and it could be boring, and we should stop working on it, because if we would continue on something that's boring, we would then have to sell it to you, and then we'd have to say, here's a boring thing and we want you to buy it. That would not be cool. So we have the freedom to experiment and do our stuff. And then when we're ready to announce it, we will. So it seems like
So for a game like this, I think what makes the most sense is to continue working on it until almost every single bug is fixed. Like keep supporting the game for maybe another 2 years or whatever. And then that should be like a smaller team. I'm not going to give them advice because I don't know how business works, but this is, in my opinion, what should probably make the most sense. So have a small team for those bug fixes and to just kind of make sure the game runs correctly. And then start on a new project with a bigger team. Now you have the funding to start on bigger projects again. They were able to do this with the funding they had is absolutely ludicrous to me. I don't know how they made that work. So now that they have even more funding, considering the amount of players they have, I think it makes sense to start something new. Either stay in the CRPG genre or kind of branch out. I know whatever these guys do is going to be good. So it doesn't matter if they release maybe a smaller game even, right? Something that's not as expansive as this is. So, yeah, I think the best course of action would be to maybe branch out or stay in the CRPG genre, but like do a different game.
Seems like we find ourselves in an interesting situation with Baldur's Gate 3 right now.
Because the other thing is whenever they do start making it, it's going to take like 6 years, 7 years before they release it.
Now, and that Larian definitely has future projects they want to work on. It almost sounds like the CEO knows exactly what they want to work on. I'm sure there'll be some prototyping and demoing of a potential expansion for Baldur's Gate 3, especially with how much money an expansion would obviously make for this game. But at the same time, it's not confirmed, and it really seems like...
And I don't think that the CEO is necessarily chasing money, right? I think this guy... I mean, it's important to make money. Right. I don't know if this company is public, but it's important to make money and it's important to make sure your shareholders are making a profit. That's just how the world works, no matter how much people hate it. That being said, I don't think that's his primary concern anymore because I feel like they're making a lot of money. I think his concern now is to make a good product. And like he said, he might be old, but he's not done yet, right? So he doesn't. If he wanted to make money, he would sell out, right? He would let Microsoft buy them or whatever.
They are overall uncertain, but honestly, of the games to not get DLC or an expansion, this is one I'm almost okay with. It just seems like there's so much content, so much choice here.
Not only so much content, but there's so many endings. I just don't know how you see by making a DLC or an expansion, you would have to say, okay, this is the correct ending. This is the stock bog standard ending, which I don't want for this game. This game shouldn't have a stock ending. Right? This game should be make your own path. And that's what it is right now. Just leave it at that. The minute you get into expansion territory, you either have to make a branching storyline or branching storyline expansions, like multiple, depending on the ending you got, which is impossible considering how many endings there are. Or you have to say this one ending, this is the correct one, which I do not want for this game.
Replayability and even just the original first-time playthrough length is insane that there's a lot of content here already. And if they want to move on to something smaller next, I'm perfectly okay with that. But if you are...
And if you do want more content, just play through the game again. You know, like there's zero chance you saw everything in your first playthrough because that's literally impossible considering the amount of branching paths you can take.
Playing Baldur's Gate 3, check out this video where I describe to you a bunch of features that you may have not known about.
That's a good video. I've seen that already. Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much more time talking about this because I think he covered everything and I feel like I gave a sufficient amount of thoughts on this. But everything being said, I think Larian Studios is probably a top 3 developer in this moment. right? Alongside maybe Naughty Dog is probably up there, and I don't know. I'm just saying they're a top 3 developer right now. Not because of the fact that they made a good game, but because of the fact that they made a good game without selling out and without having microtransactions. I know that's like almost funny because like I shouldn't have to say that. They aren't good because they didn't have microtransactions, but that is a part of it, unfortunately, in the current day. And they released a game that was, I mean, I haven't played the later acts, but it's relatively polished at where I'm at, right? And I can only give my opinion on this. I don't have too many friends that are playing this game. But yeah, I think they created a phenomenal game here, and I think they are only headed for success. I think they would have to either change CEOs or get sold out to a bigger company if they want to mess up, right? Because right now everything they're doing is correct. Divinity Original Sin 2 was a phenomenal game, one of my favorite games of all time, and then this just like, you know, absolutely took off and is way better. That's crazy to say that this game is way better than Divinity Original Sin 2 because Divinity Original Sin 2 is a top tier, S tier RPG. Before playing Divinity Original Sin 2, I hated turn-based games. I was like, this is boring as heck. All I want to do is play games like Souls games where I'm like actively rolling and like it's real-time combat. And then I played Divinity Original Sin 2 and I was like, oh my god, okay, turn-based does work. And then Baldur's Gate 3 released. And then this game's doing everything Divinity Original Sin 2 did, but way better. That's ridiculous. I would have never expected that to happen. Anyway, I could talk about this game for hours. I'm not going to. This is already way longer than I expected it to be. Why does that always happen? But if you guys liked the video, maybe give me a like. If you didn't like the video, that's okay too. Give me a dislike. Let me know what you didn't like so I can maybe try and improve it on the next video. I'm trying to improve with every video that I make. And if you guys like this kind of content where I like react to videos or even do like game reviews or any kind of other analysis, maybe give me a subscribe. I try and put out content at least once a week, if not twice. So I've been slacking a little last week because I had to go to Texas for something. But yeah, if you guys like the videos, give me a sub, and I hope to catch you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye.